Good morning, Dan. And in for Amy this morning is entrepreneur capitalist extraordinaire Sean from Elmwood Park.
I don't have the legs, but I'm filling in, baby.
You are. And last night, the Illinois State Supreme Court ruled in a 4-3 decision along partisan lines, because that's the composition of the Illinois State Supreme Court, 4-3 Democrat, that the remap amendment ballot question shall not be on the November ballot. We talked to Dennis Fitzsimons, who's with the Independent Map Project. They gathered north of 560,000 signatures from Illinoisans who ostensibly have some interest in supporting a change in how we do the districting process. So as the cliche goes, politicians don't pick their voters, voters pick their politicians. They also altered it from the last effort along these lines that the Supreme Court rejected. They thought they would pass constitutional muster, but that they ran into Tom Kilbride. And I mentioned this when we talked to Dennis Fitzsimons, but I want to mention it again because, as a great man once said, Illinois isn't broken, it's fixed.
Who was that great man?
That was me.
Oh.
And Thomas Kilbride, who was retained, the judges face a retention vote every 10 years. He was retained in 2010. He was supported by former, quote-unquote, Republican Governor Jim Thompson. Mm-hmm. Former, quote-unquote, Republican Governor Jim Edgar stayed out of the race, didn't oppose the Kilbride retention because he was in bed with Ann Burke, figuratively speaking, who's also a Supreme Court Justice, State Supreme Court Justice.
That the guy with the watch with the Rolex and the green face? That's his wife?
Correct, yeah.
Oh,
and
he's got his own alley.
The Carnation.
Yeah, I like that guy.
He's got the guy with the Lincoln Town Car idling outside Union League Club with the security detail.
And when he's at the Viagra Triangle, drinks are on the house.
And Thomas Kilbride, who wrote the majority opinion for the Democrats, was supported by Mike Madigan as a retention vote. $2.5 million in campaign financing for Kilbride from Mike Madigan in 2010. And the opposition to the remap ballot question even being put on the ballot for voter consideration and action is led by Mike Madigan and his lawyer.
Get out.
So, that's connecting the dots. So maybe I'm just another part of the vast right-wing conspiracy, and this is all very innocent. For more on this and other state and local matters, we're happy to be joined by Charles Thomas, ABC7 Chicago political reporter.
Charles.
Hey, Charles, how you doing?
Water's fine.
I don't know if I should get involved in this show, man. You guys seem to be connecting too many dots.
Well, I know, and we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to pretend that this is a state of happy coincidences,
dots, man.
Right?
That's the way you do it in the People's Republic of Illinois. You don't connect dots, man, or you could get in big trouble.
There you go. Well, so what about that? I mean, were you surprised by the state Supreme Court decision?
I got to tell you, I wasn't because, as you have so astutely pointed out, there are a lot of dots that can be connected here. I go back to that old adage that the night is darkest a few minutes before dawn. What we've seen over the past year or two in Illinois are issues being put in just graphic relief. We're seeing it now. It's all bubbling to the surface. We can see the fix, if you will, and an average voter can see what's going on right now because, again, things are being put in very graphic relief. The Supreme Court rejecting not one, but two in a row, initiatives by people, hundreds of thousands of people signed petitions. Any survey you take shows that Illinois voters would support redistricting and term limits, or certainly there is a public concern about it, and the public needs to have a voice. And the court 2 times in a row now saying the public should not have a voice. And I think people are just even more outraged by what they see.
Charles, this is Sean. I got to tell you, I've always liked you. I like you very much. And it wasn't until today that I was reading your bio. And first of all, I'm amazed. 3 kids, you raised them, you did a great job. You've been to all 50 states. But the thing that caught my eye, you've been to 5 of the 7 continents. And so I know you're a well-traveled guy. You've seen a lot of third world banana republics. Aren't we one now?
Oh, man, look. let me tell you, I don't want to get off the subject, but I'm sitting here this morning, and I do a lot of reading in the morning, and I'm looking at a study that was released 1 week ago, last week, and I don't know if you guys talked about it at all. It's by the Economic Policy Institute, which is the largest and most profound big labor think tank in Washington. Its chairman is Richard Trumka of the AFL-CIO.
Yeah, the fitness instructor.
It reported that Illinois has the highest black unemployment rate in the country and has had it for the last 3 quarters, the highest black unemployment rate in the country. That's higher than Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, the so-called legacy slave states. What is going on? And the muscle of the Illinois Democratic Party is the black vote.
Right. So I'm an old speculator.
What is going on?
Well, so what is going on, and what is it going to take to get something else going on?
Well, it's going to take information. This study, for instance, people have got to see this. They've got to know that even big labor, this left-center think tank in Washington, is saying that Illinois has the highest black unemployment rate. So why are black voters, 95% of them, getting behind the status quo?
Because it's easy. I mean, here's my supposition. Get your reaction to it, Charles. It's easy just to say, well, white Republicans in the suburbs or white Republicans in general, they're racist, and so you don't even have to consider what they have to say because they're racist.
That's misinformation, though.
Well, I know
that's
it
misinformation.
is.
Guess what? Texas has the lowest black unemployment rate in the country.
Imagine that.
Yeah, check it out. I know black people myself who are moving to Texas to get jobs right now. I know them personally, can point them out, can do stories about them. So what's going on? But at the same time, the defenders of the status quo are being supported by this massive number of African American voters.
Yeah, and supported by, to a large extent, I would argue, the Chicago and Springfield press corps that is left, just as the D.C. press corps is left. And, and so the questions about, what color are the people that are dying on the streets of Chicago? Is it mostly white people or is it mostly black people and Latino people? Of course, we know the answer. And who controls Chicago for the last 100 years? And, of course, we know the answer. And who controls Chicago Public Schools for the last 100 years? And, of course, we know the answer. And who's controlled Springfield for the last 40? And, of course, we know the answer. But the answers don't seem to matter.
Well, it could, I think, with enough information. I think with enough information, it could matter. But I think there has to be an effort to provide the right information, to let you hear different voices. You talk about the voices you hear on issues are generally those they're basically self-serving, and I understand it totally. Leaders of labor unions that you hear speaking on behalf of of black people, when in fact, if you go to, for instance, parents of children or workers or unemployed workers in particular, you will hear an entirely different story.
Yeah, what do you think? Moving down to say Chicago and Rahm Emanuel, the property tax spikes, the fairy tale budget that Claypool just put out for CPS, the increase in the water sewer tax, which is regressive.
Yeah.
You have a lot of black exodus from the city of Chicago too, to Texas and everywhere else. What about that? Is there going to be? Do you think the seeds are there for black families in Chicago to demand something different and potentially to be open to the entrance of people that they hadn't considered before? If there was ever a Republican, or even though it's a nonpartisan election, you know what I mean, functionally a Republican to run for mayor or to run for city council posts.
Well, I don't know about all that at this point, because the Republican Party is so damaged because of what's happened to it over the last 30 years. But I think there certainly is a voice out there that we're not hearing. The African-American homeowner, for instance, who is paying these property taxes and these higher water bills, they don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. But we're not hearing that voice enough. But that voice is certainly out there. And we also have to understand as well, and which I don't think the mainstream media gets this, is that the black middle class is not on the south and west sides of Chicago. It's in Thornton Township, Bloom Township, Rich Township in the south suburbs, Proviso Township out west, and really any and everywhere. And that voice is not necessarily being heard.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's an excellent point. He is Charles Thomas, ABC7 Chicago political reporter. Charles, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, man, thank you for having me.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.